Picture this moment. October 31st, 1517. A single monk walks toward the castle church in Wittenberg, in his hand a piece of parchment. 95 theses that will shatter the unity of Western Christianity forever. Martin Luther doesn't know it yet, but he's about to unleash something far more powerful than religious reform. He's about to prove that one person, standing alone against the world, can change everything. This is the story of individualism, the most revolutionary idea in human history. For over 200,000 years, humans survive by thinking as one. Tribe first, group first, always group first. But somewhere along the way, a different thought emerged. What if the individual mattered more than the collective? What if one person's mind, one person's choice, one person's freedom could reshape civilization itself? Today, that idea rules half the world. It built the greatest economies in history. It created unprecedented freedom. It launched us to the moon and connected every corner of the earth. But it also isolated us, divided us, left millions wondering if they matter at all in a world that worships the self above everything else. This is the story of how a single concept conquered the world, and why it might be destroying us. Before individualism, there was only the group. In the caves of Lascaux 30,000 years ago, no artist signed their work. The paintings belonged to the tribe. The hunt belonged to the tribe. Life itself belonged to the tribe. Personal desire meant death. Personal choice meant exile. The individual was nothing more than a cell in a larger organism. Ancient Egypt perfected this collective thinking. For 3,000 years, pharaohs ruled as gods. Millions of people lived and died as extensions of divine will. The pyramids rose not because individuals chose to build them, but because the collective will demanded it. Personal ambition existed only within the rigid boundaries of social order. But then came Greece, Athens, 5th century BCE. Something unprecedented happens. For the first time in human history, citizens begin to debate, not just about practical matters, but about fundamental questions. What is justice? What is truth? What does it mean to live a good life? Socrates walks through the agora, questioning everything. Know thyself, he declares. Not know your place or know your role, but know thyself. The individual mind becomes worthy of examination. Personal conscience becomes a valid source of truth. The effect is immediate and explosive. Within a century, Athens produces more philosophical innovation than the previous 3 millennia combined. Art flourishes, science advances, democracy emerges. The individual mind, given permission to think freely, begins to reshape the world. But Athens falls. Rome conquers Greece, and with it, the early sparks of individualism. For the next 1,000 years, Europe returns to collective thinking. Christianity unifies thought under divine authority. Feudalism locks every person into their predetermined role. The individual disappears again, absorbed into the great medieval synthesis of faith and hierarchy. Then comes the Renaissance. Florence, 1401. Lorenzo Ghiberti wins a competition to design bronze doors for the Baptistery of San Giovanni. For the first time since antiquity, an artist signs his name to public work, not as a craftsman fulfilling a commission, but as an individual creative force worthy of recognition. This moment marks more than artistic pride. It signals a fundamental shift in how humans understand themselves. The individual mind isn't just a vessel for divine will or collective purpose. It's a source of value in itself. Leonardo da Vinci embodies this transformation. Artist, scientist, engineer, philosopher. He studies everything from anatomy to astronomy, not because the church demands it or because society needs it, but because his individual curiosity drives him. His notebooks, written in mirror script, represent the ultimate act of individualism. Private thoughts, preserved for personal reflection. The printing press accelerates everything. Ideas spread faster than authorities can control them. Martin Luther's theses reach every corner of Europe within weeks. Suddenly, individuals don't need priests to interpret scripture. They can read and think for themselves. The Protestant Reformation isn't just about religion, it's about individual conscience versus collective authority. John Calvin takes this further. In Geneva, he argues that individuals can have direct relationships with God. No intermediaries required. Each person becomes their own moral agent, responsible for their own salvation. Personal responsibility replaces collective obedience. But the real revolution happens in philosophy. René Descartes sits alone in a small room in Bavaria. It's 1620, and he's trying to rebuild all of human knowledge from the ground up. He doubts everything: church teachings, scientific theories, even his own senses. But he cannot doubt one thing: the fact that he's thinking. I think, therefore I am. With these 4 words, Descartes places the individual mind at the center of reality itself. Not God, not society, not tradition. The thinking self becomes the foundation of all truth. This isn't just philosophy, it's the intellectual declaration of independence for every human being. John Locke builds on this foundation. In his 2 treatises of government, he argues that individuals possess natural rights that no authority can revoke. Life, liberty, and property don't come from kings or priests. They come from being human. Government exists only to protect these individual rights. If it fails, individuals have the right to dissolve it. These ideas cross the Atlantic and ignite a revolution. Thomas Jefferson writes, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." The American Revolution becomes the first successful attempt to build a society around individual rights rather than collective authority. But individualism's greatest champion hasn't even been born yet. Adam Smith walks through the bustling markets of Edinburgh in 1759. He watches bakers, butchers, and brewers serve their customers not out of benevolence, but out of self-interest. Each person pursues their own advantage, yet somehow everyone benefits. This observation becomes the wealth of nations. Smith argues that individuals, freely pursuing their own interests, create more prosperity than any central authority could plan. The invisible hand of the market coordinates millions of individual decisions into collective benefit. This is individualism's economic revolution. For the first time, self-interest becomes a virtue rather than a vice. Personal ambition drives progress. Individual choice creates wealth. The collective good emerges not from collective planning, but from individual freedom. The Industrial Revolution proves Smith right. Countries that embrace individual economic freedom experience unprecedented growth. Britain becomes the workshop of the world. America's economy explodes across the continent. Personal initiative builds railroads, factories, and entire cities. But individualism's greatest test is still coming. Alexis de Tocqueville arrives in America in 1831. He comes to study the prison system but stays to examine something far more remarkable: a society built on individualism. What he finds both amazes and terrifies him. Americans, he observes, believe that each person can think for themselves, choose their own path, and shape their own destiny. They form voluntary associations for every conceivable purpose. They elect their own leaders. They move freely across vast territories, seeking opportunity wherever they can find it. But Tocqueville also sees the dark side. Americans, he warns, risk becoming isolated from each other. They trust their own judgment so completely that they struggle to accept authority or expertise. They become, in his words, shut up in the solitude of their own hearts. This tension defines democratic individualism. Personal freedom creates prosperity and innovation, but it also weakens the social bonds that hold communities together. The individual becomes powerful but lonely. The American Civil War tests whether individualism can hold a nation together. Abraham Lincoln frames the conflict not just as a battle over slavery, but as a test of whether government of the people, by the people, for the people can survive. Individual rights must be balanced against collective survival. The Union wins, but the tension remains. Andrew Carnegie steps off a ship in New York Harbor in 1848. He's 13 years old. His family owns nothing. 50 years later, he controls the largest steel company in the world. His story becomes the ultimate expression of individualistic capitalism. One person, through pure effort and ambition, can rise from poverty to unimaginable wealth. But Carnegie isn't alone. John D. Rockefeller builds Standard Oil into the world's largest corporation. Henry Ford revolutionizes manufacturing and creates the modern middle class. These men become living proof that individualism works. Personal ambition drives innovation, creates jobs, and improves living standards for millions. Yet their success also reveals individualism's dangers. Rockefeller controls 90% of America's oil refining capacity. Ford pays his workers well but demands complete obedience. Carnegie's steel mills make him wealthy, while his workers labor in dangerous conditions for minimal pay. The individual can become so powerful that they threaten the freedom of other individuals. Theodore Roosevelt recognizes this paradox. His trust-busting campaigns attempt to preserve individualism by preventing any single individual or corporation from accumulating too much power. The solution to individualism's problems, he argues, isn't less individualism, but better regulated individualism. This balance between individual freedom and collective welfare becomes the defining challenge of the 20th century. St. Petersburg, 1917. Vladimir Lenin stands before a crowd of workers and soldiers. He promises them bread, land, and peace. But he's offering something more fundamental, the end of individualism itself. The Bolshevik Revolution seeks to eliminate private property, personal ambition, and individual choice in favor of collective ownership and central planning. Similar movements spread across the world. Fascism in Italy and Germany promises to subsume individual identity into the national collective. Individuals matter only as parts of the greater whole. Personal desires must yield to state demands. The 20th century becomes a brutal test between individualism and collectivism. World War II pits democratic individualism against both fascist and communist collectivism. The Cold War extends this conflict for half a century. But even as political collectivism challenges individualism externally, internal contradictions begin to emerge within individualistic societies themselves. Sigmund Freud publishes The Interpretation of Dreams in 1900. He argues that individual behavior is driven by unconscious desires and conflicts. The individual mind becomes not just important, but infinitely complex and mysterious. Everyone requires individual analysis to understand their unique psychological makeup. This psychological revolution intensifies individualism. People begin to see themselves as uniquely complex beings, with individual needs, desires, and identities that must be understood and expressed. The self becomes not just important, but endlessly fascinating. Carl Jung adds to this by arguing that individuals must pursue their own path of psychological development. Individuation becomes a life goal. Everyone must discover and become their authentic self. By the 1960s, this psychological individualism explodes into popular culture. The counterculture movement champions individual expression over social conformity. Do your own thing becomes a generational motto. Personal authenticity trumps traditional authority. But this psychological individualism creates new problems. If everyone is uniquely individual, how can society maintain shared values or common purposes? If personal authenticity is the highest good, what happens to duty, sacrifice, and collective responsibility? January 1st, 1983. The Internet officially launches with the adoption of TCP/IP protocols. Initially designed to help researchers share information, it quickly becomes something far more revolutionary. A platform for individual expression on a global scale. The World Wide Web, launched in 1991, allows anyone to publish their thoughts, ideas, and experiences for a global audience. Suddenly, every individual can potentially reach millions of others without going through traditional gatekeepers like publishers, broadcasters, or political authorities. Social media takes this further. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube allow individuals to broadcast their lives, thoughts, and opinions in real time. Everyone becomes their own media company. Personal branding becomes essential. Individual identity becomes a carefully curated public performance. The economic implications are staggering. The gig economy allows individuals to work independently rather than as employees. Uber, Airbnb, and Amazon create platforms where individuals can monetize their personal assets. Traditional employment relationships, which provided security but limited individual freedom, give way to flexible arrangements that maximize individual choice but minimize collective support. But the digital revolution also accelerates individualism's dark side. Social media creates echo chambers where individuals only encounter information that confirms their existing beliefs. Fake news spreads because individuals trust their own judgment over expert authority. Political polarization increases as people retreat into ideological tribes that reflect their individual identities. The internet, designed to connect humanity, begins to fragment it into billions of individual realities. Today, individualism faces its greatest test. It has created unprecedented prosperity, freedom, and innovation. The wealthiest societies in human history are the most individualistic. Personal freedom has expanded to levels unimaginable just a century ago. Technology allows individuals to pursue their interests, connect with like-minded people, and achieve their goals in ways previous generations could never dream of. But individualism has also created unprecedented loneliness, anxiety, and social fragmentation. Depression rates skyrocket in the most individualistic countries. Social trust declines. People increasingly struggle to form lasting relationships, maintain stable communities, or work together toward common goals. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed these tensions starkly. Individual freedom to move, gather, and make personal choices conflicted with collective needs for public health measures. Some countries with stronger collective traditions manage the crisis more effectively than highly individualistic societies. Climate change presents an even greater challenge. Addressing global warming requires unprecedented international cooperation and individual sacrifice for collective benefit. Yet individualistic societies struggle to motivate people to change their behavior for abstract, long-term collective goals. Meanwhile, authoritarian countries like China argue that their more collectivist approaches allow them to pursue long-term strategies and maintain social stability more effectively than individualistic democracies. The competition between individualism and collectivism continues into the 21st century. At its core, individualism contains a fundamental paradox. It promises that everyone can be unique, special, and personally fulfilled. But when everyone pursues individual uniqueness, the result is often conformity to new types of collective pressure. Social media creates new forms of peer pressure. Consumer culture sells individual identity through mass-produced products. Personal authenticity becomes a market commodity. Moreover, radical individualism undermines the social institutions that make individual freedom possible. Markets require trust, law enforcement, and social cooperation. Democracy requires citizens who can compromise and work together. Innovation requires education systems and research institutions that transcend individual interests. The individual, pursued to its logical extreme, destroys the conditions that make individuality possible. This paradox appears throughout individualistic societies. Americans celebrate individual achievement, but worry about social fragmentation. Entrepreneurs require collective infrastructure, but resist collective obligations. Personal freedom depends on social stability, but social stability requires limits on personal freedom. Perhaps the key to understanding individualism lies not in resolving these contradictions, but in managing them. The most successful individualistic societies maintain a balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility. They create space for personal choice while preserving shared institutions. They encourage individual achievement while maintaining social safety nets. Scandinavian countries exemplify this balance. They combine strong individual freedoms with robust welfare states. They encourage entrepreneurship while maintaining economic equality. They protect personal rights while fostering social cohesion. But this balance is difficult to maintain and easy to lose. It requires constant negotiation between competing values and interests. It demands that individuals accept some limits on their freedom for collective benefit, and that collectives respect individual rights even when inconvenient. The challenge becomes even more complex in diverse, globalized societies where people hold fundamentally different values and belong to different cultural traditions. How can individualism adapt to pluralistic realities while maintaining its core commitments to personal freedom and individual dignity? As we look toward the future, individualism faces new challenges that its founders could never have imagined. Artificial intelligence threatens to automate away many individual jobs and skills. Genetic engineering could allow parents to design their children's individual characteristics. Virtual reality might allow people to retreat into personalized digital worlds rather than engaging with shared physical reality. These technologies could either enhance individual freedom or destroy it entirely. AI could free people from tedious work, allowing them to pursue their individual interests and talents. Or it could create mass unemployment and concentrate power in the hands of a few tech billionaires. Genetic engineering could eliminate inherited diseases and enhance human capabilities. Or it could create new forms of inequality based on genetic advantages. The outcome depends largely on how individualistic societies choose to govern these technologies. Will they allow market forces and individual choices to shape the future? Or will they require collective democratic deliberation and regulation? The answer may determine whether individualism survives the 21st century or transforms into something unrecognizable. Meanwhile, the global competition between individualistic and collectivistic societies continues to intensify. China's rapid economic growth challenges the assumption that individual freedom is necessary for prosperity. Singapore combines limited political freedom with extensive economic success. These examples suggest that there may be multiple paths to human flourishing, not all of which require Western-style individualism. At the same time, individualistic values spread through global communications and trade. Young people in authoritarian countries increasingly demand individual freedoms. Social media allows individuals to organize resistance movements and share information despite government censorship. The appeal of individual choice and personal freedom appears to be universal, even if its institutional expressions vary. This global competition will likely determine individualism's future trajectory. If individualistic societies can solve their internal problems while maintaining their economic dynamism and innovative capacity, individualism will continue to spread. If they succumb to polarization, inequality, and social fragmentation, alternative models may prove more attractive. The history of individualism reveals a fundamental tension in human nature itself. We are social creatures who nevertheless possess individual consciousness, personal desires, and unique perspectives. We need others to survive and thrive, yet we also need space to think, choose, and act as individuals. Every society must find some balance between these competing needs. Some emphasize collective harmony at the expense of personal freedom. Others prioritize individual choice at the cost of social cohesion. The most successful societies throughout history have found ways to honor both dimensions of human nature. But this balance is never permanent. Each generation must renegotiate the relationship between self and society based on new circumstances, technologies, and challenges. The individualism that served the 18th century may not work for the 21st. The collective institutions that supported 20th century individualism may need updating for 21st century realities. The story of individualism is far from over. It continues to evolve, adapt, and transform in response to changing conditions. Its future depends on whether we can preserve its benefits while addressing its limitations. Can we maintain individual freedom while rebuilding social trust? Can we encourage personal achievement while ensuring collective welfare? Can we celebrate human uniqueness while working together toward common goals? These questions define our era as we face challenges that require both individual initiative and collective action. From climate change to technological disruption to global inequality, the tension between self and society has never been more relevant. The individual mind that emerged in ancient Greece, flowered in the Renaissance, and conquered the modern world now faces its ultimate test. Will individualism prove adaptable enough to survive the 21st century? Or will it give way to new forms of human organization that we cannot yet imagine? The answer lies not in our past, but in the choices we make today. Each of us, as individuals, must decide what kind of society we want to live in and what price we're willing to pay for our freedom. What will you choose?